Hello, my name is Michael, and I am currently in Philadelphia, and this is one of my first videos, or my first video, hopefully of many. Essentially, the point of this channel is mostly as a personal way for me to sort of espouse some of the ideas that are often rejected currently in modern politics, and provide, I guess, a young person's perspective on modern political events. Well, today is Veterans Day, and coincidentally, and first I'd like to begin just by thanking all the veterans for their service. That being said, right now in the Middle East, tensions are rising. Domestic civil liberties are being eroded as a result of Middle Eastern foreign policy, and military spending is skyrocketing. All the while, millions of soldiers are dying, as well as many children, women and children, and civilians in all these Middle Eastern countries, including not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but Pakistan, Yemen, Libya, etc. So, for the benefit of the veterans, and for the benefit of every citizen of the United States, I think we should withdraw from the Middle East. The big story this week, besides Veterans Day, is the election, of course, and I have mixed feelings about the election. I think every conservative, even the Republicans, if you will, were secretly rooting for Romney in the end, because anything but Obama seemed like a very logical position. Retrospectively, if you exclude all emotions, you come to the conclusion that they're very similar, and rooting for one over the other is kind of pointless, because both of them are very similar, especially in foreign policy, and even in domestic policy, both of them are very similar. But nevertheless, it is disappointing because the outcome is Barack Obama being re-elected. I mentioned similarities before. Both of them support the NDAA, the Patriot Act, the Federal Reserve. No matter what Romney says, he does support increased taxes. That's the only way to balance the budget, because he doesn't want to cut spending. He can't, because he would not, like any other Republican president in the past several decades or even past century, he would not cut substantively any program, especially entitlements, and that is really what's dragging us down right now. A lot of our money is spent on entitlements, and a lot of it, over 25%, is spent on military spending. If you eliminate military spending completely, which is also not something that they could do logically, that would completely eliminate the deficit, but you do have to keep some military spending just on a diplomatic basis and on a preventative measure basis. But a lot of our spending right now is in the Middle East, so like I said, withdrawing from the Middle East would help solve that problem, as well as cutting entitlements and lowering taxes. Well, another issue about the election is, and by the way, if you're curious, this is just some resources I have readily available for the video. There are a few states in which the amount of voters who voted for Ron Paul, and this is not counting Gary Johnson, by the way, just the people voting for Ron Paul, if you took the margins of the people who voted for Ron Paul and transferred them to Romney, Romney would end up winning those states. And those 5 states are Connecticut, Florida, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Virginia. If you have your handy electoral maps, and I have mine here, if you wait for a moment, I'll fill in all the states, and then we'll see what happens. He won most of the West Coast, unsurprisingly, including Nevada, which I thought was going to go for the Republican this time around, but unfortunately it didn't. He also won Colorado, which was very important for him. Ended up being very important, although he would have won in a landslide anyway. So the point I'm trying to make, essentially, is that if you take all the states that I mentioned before, with their very small margin victories, and transfer those electoral votes, or not electoral votes, rather, just raw vote. If you transfer the raw vote from Ron Paul to Romney, then Romney would end up winning those states. And those states include, as I mentioned before, Connecticut, Florida, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Virginia. So let's do this. This is how it would currently look like. I'm not sure if it's probably mirrored here, but you get the picture. So let's switch the aforementioned states to Romney. Virginia, Florida, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Ohio. And here's what happens. Now, Mitt Romney is the President of the United States. So it begs the question, why did people not vote for Romney? They could have had the option to, they would have had a Republican president. My theory is it goes deeper than just the higher Democratic turnout. It goes to the ideas of the Republican Party. And this isn't, I don't believe in the, we don't have to be conservative anymore. We have to remove what little of the small government platform remains of the Republican Party. We have to remove that in order to appeal to minorities. I think it's a very terrible argument. I think it's bad for the Republican Party. I think it's bad for the country. But that being said, I think there are ways to appeal to minorities, but you have to appeal to people realistically on a personal level. You can't just say, we're going to cut taxes for millionaires because that's going to create jobs. You have to somehow convince people that it will affect their daily lives. And for someone who's educated politically, more jobs would inherently benefit every individual in the United States, at least those who don't have a job or who want a job. But most people don't view it that way. They think Romney's going to take away food stamps, he's going to take... Some people, I'm not even joking, they said he's going to ban tampons, which is very interesting. I personally never heard him say that, but nevertheless, it's interesting, like, what the source was for that, who gave him the idea in the first place. But I think we're not trying to appeal to minorities. I didn't see it pushed to appeal to minorities. Most of the ads I saw would appeal to middle-class white voters, and Romney won every single demographic in the white voters. He won white women. He won white youth. He lost youth as well as other parts of demographics because of minority voters. He lost African Americans. Obama got more than 90%. I think it was 93% or 92%. Excuse me, of African Americans nationally, and he lost Latinos, 70%. He also lost African American. Like, obviously, he would lose African American and Hispanic women. So you have to assume. Here's the thing: you can't appeal to the voters if they want in their brains, they want more welfare, they want more food stamps. The only way to appeal to that kind of individual is to say, we're going to give you more welfare, I'm going to give you more food stamps, and that's why Democrats will continue to win for hundreds and hundreds of years if the country isn't. It probably will be bankrupt by then. Nevertheless, you have to change the mindset of the individual, and that's a very hard thing to do. It's not something that's going to be accomplished in an election. But I think it's happening now, and I think a lot of that is due to the Ron Paul revolution, especially in the youth. Speaking of Ron Paul, I talked about his vote, how they could have affected the election if they were given to Romney, being Romney would win. But there were a few positive things out of Election Day, which is something you're probably not hearing in the news a lot. A lot of new Ron Paul Republicans took the places of retiring Republicans and won. A few of them are well, at least I think it's one was reelected, Justin Amash, which we all know by now, from Michigan. Overwhelmingly elected, by the way. And there were others which were elected. Thomas Massie, Rand Paul was also re-elected. And there were others like Carrie Bentivolio, which was a high school teacher, and Walter Jones. I think that's it. I don't think there were any others. But although we lost votes in the Senate in total, and I believe in the House we also lost a few. I don't think we widened our majority in the House, ours and Republicans. But a lot of the Republicans that were elected are liberty-oriented Republicans, which is something that we need right now because, frankly, you have neoconservatives and then you have hard left liberals, and neither are good for the country, and that's why a lot of people, 12 million people decide not to vote. Like, more, I mean, obviously it's more than 12 million people decide not to vote, but 12 million more than 2008 decide not to vote. And that's a very scary thought, that less people voted for Romney and Ryan than McCain and Palin. That's something that people thought couldn't happen. That's something very difficult to accomplish if you consider that an accomplishment. I also know something very humorous, although kind of sad. The first few things that Obama did once he got reelected, he opened negotiations on a UN small arms treaty, renewed his support for an assault weapons ban in the United States, droned, I believe it was Libya or Yemen, I think it was Libya, and he also droned a funeral as well. I mean, it's just, and then obviously renewed his support for higher taxes, although that doesn't even need to be renewed at this point. I think it's kind of self-evident that he supports higher taxes. I just think it's very depressing. Personally speaking, I don't want to be the nihilistic viewpoint here, but or the pessimistic viewpoint here, but it's very depressing. And I think the reaction of most libertarians to this election was very depressing in general. I mean, that's the only logical reaction. This is very depressing. It's very depressing that the Republicans chose someone who would fit perfectly into the Democratic Party, if not for his Middle Eastern foreign policy rhetoric, although the actual policy is very similar. If not, he would fit into the Democratic Party perfectly. The Republican Party, not so much, although the naive Republican voters in the primary, and I know I sound kind of condescending here, but I mean, you can't call them anything else considering they elected Mitt Romney as their nominee. You can't call them anything but naive. And then they go to the Republican convention and they try to unseat the main delegation. I mean, they don't even read Ron Paul's name at the podium, the delegates he won. And then they expect Ron Paul voters to vote for Mitt Romney because, as a Fox News article put it, it's the only sane choice for libertarians. That's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. I mean, and it's, speaking of condescension, it's condescending to libertarians to assume that we would ever vote for someone like Romney, not only because of his lack of conservatism, but because of how he treated the Ron Paul supporters and Gary Johnson supporters, because a lot of them could go either way, frankly. I think that's something that makes us distinct compared to Obama or Romney supporters. We don't vote for the person, we vote for the principles. And Gary Johnson and Ron Paul had similar principles, so frankly, the vote is divided because they're both very good candidates, although I do share the view that Ron Paul is more knowledgeable about economic issues. And there's a radio interview you could look up. I saw it a few months ago. I'm not sure what radio station it was on. It was a Gary Johnson interview about Austrian economics with a libertarian local news station, and Gary Johnson couldn't answer what caused the recession. So, in a presidential candidate, although I'm sure Obama and Romney couldn't answer it either, and Gary Johnson is still leaps and bounds better than Obama and Romney. I don't think he has reached the intellectual standing of Ron Paul in the Republican Party or in any other, or just in the political atmosphere in this libertarian subgroup. The last thing, as far as unless I think of something else that I wanted to discuss, is that the country is at a very difficult point in time. I, as an individual, just by the luck of myself being born, fall into tens and tens of thousands of dollars of debt as a national debt because of our government spending recklessly, and no one wants to solve the problem. Republicans will not solve the problem. They won't. Only a few that I mentioned earlier that are Ron Paul Republicans would ever try to solve the problem. That's what you have to notice. That's what we have to realize. And I'm speaking exclusively to Republicans right now. The people you support, like Lindsey Graham, they won't solve the problem. They won't try to solve the problem. Boehner will not solve the problem. He won't. I mean, they're failures, frankly. They're failures. I mean, and it says something about the American populace that the same Congress with a 7% approval rating is reelected almost in its entirety. It's very saddening, and it's very ridiculous, and it's very just depressing. Although I don't want to end on that note, but it is very depressing. To the Democrats, keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be very successful in the elections if you're going to keep doing what you're doing right now. Unfortunately, that success comes at a cost, the cost of the United States drowning in debt. I mean, enjoy it while you still can, but when we have a monetary collapse and everyone's unemployed and hyperinflation occurs, hopefully it's not going to happen, but if we continue on this course it will, then I don't think you're going to remember your joyous celebration at this election too fondly, because Obama will not solve the problem, Democrats will not solve the problem. They openly want to make the problem worse. Let me give you, I guess, a guideline. Balanced approach equals taxes. Okay, let's put that there. Republicans stopping, or I guess you could say interfering with Obama's policies, that's called, at least to a certain extent, economic patriotism. And I'm not talking about the same kind of economic patriotism that Obama always espouses with the increased tax hikes, or the tax hikes. It's a different kind of economic patriotism, because it allows the minority to still have a voice and not to just be pummeled by the majority. And a lot of libertarians probably recognize this phrase, but it's like two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. The sheep still has rights. You can't take away the sheep's rights just because it's in the minority here. With that being said, for the amount of times the Republicans have vetoed Democrats' bills, they haven't proposed a lot of spending cuts of their own, and it's a very interesting paradigm, I think, that we have here. You have Democrats wanting to raise the debt by trillions and trillions of dollars. And then you have Republicans saying, we don't want to raise debt by trillions of dollars and to balance this budget. And then they propose a budget, as in Paul Ryan's budget, which balances the budget in 40 years. and that's a very liberal budget, frankly. I think it's very liberal. I don't think it's conservative at all. And then the Democrats go all crazy and they show grandma being pushed off the cliff. If 40 years to balance the budget is grandma being pushed off the cliff, then I don't know what that means just on a mathematical basis. I don't see how it's possible. Well, it isn't. it isn't possible. And like I mentioned this before, I don't want to sound like the pessimistic individual right now, but frankly I am. There's no optimistic way to view the partisan gridlock in Congress. And I think, and let me revise that statement, it's not even partisan, because partisan implies that there are at least principles at stake. There are no principles at stake. It's literally just a party being against another party. And it's very sad. It's despicable. It's abhorrent, and it's not what the founders would have wanted for the country. On that positive note, I would like to end with the reading of a prepared statement I had back for Election Day on the election. Or rather, a George Carlin quote in a poem on the topic of it. And this is the quote: "If you vote and elect dishonest, incompetent people into office, screw everything up, you're responsible for what they've done. You caused the problem, you voted them in, you have no right to complain." Unquote. And frankly, and this is very sad, but the country deserves the leader that it elects. This country deserves Barack Obama because this country is a collection of uninformed, ignorant individuals, voters who do not know what they're talking about. They listen to an ad on YouTube and they take every word of it for truth. If you ask them what the National Defense Authorization Act is, they won't be able to answer the question. I think it's very sad that someone like myself, and I'm not trying to sound condescending here, again, someone like myself who's 14 can answer more questions about political issues or historical issues for that matter than a seemingly educated voter who has voted for either Governor Romney or Barack Obama, especially Barack Obama, because at least the Governor Romney supporters pretend like they know economic issues, but they don't like tie it back to their candidate, in which case they wouldn't vote for him. But I digress. This is a poem, and it's called "The Visitor from the Past," and It's written by Thielen Polk. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Here's a poem, and if you want to hear it, it's frankly, it's very, very good. It's very accurate. It's a few months old, as far as I know. I had a dream the other night I didn't understand. A figure walking through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by the bed. He took off his three-cornered hat, and speaking low, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as a shield from tyranny. For future generations, this legacy we gave, and this, the land of the free and the home of the brave. The freedom we secured for you, we hope you always keep, while tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom gone, your courage lost, you're no more than a slave. In this, the land of the free and the home of the brave. You buy permits to travel, and permits to own a gun, permits to start a business, or to build a place for one. On land that you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent, although you have no voice in choosing how the money's spent. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate. Your wealth is stolen from you by some arbitrary rate. You read about the current news in a regulated press. You pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver or of gold. You trade your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from liberty to shame. You've taken Satan's number as you trade in your name. You've given government control to those who do you harm, so you can padlock businesses and steal the family farm. You keep the country deep in debt, put peaceful citizens in jail, harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Your public servants don't hold the solemn oath they've sworn. Your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. Your leaders ship artillery and guns to foreign shores, and send your sons to slaughter, fighting other people's wars. Can you regain freedom for which we fought and died, or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? Are there no more values for which we'll fight to save, or do you wish your children to live in fear or be a slave? Sons of the Republic, arise and take a stand, defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, preserve our great Republic and each inalienable right, and keep the torch of freedom burning bright." As I awoke, he vanished, in the mist from which he came. His words were true, we are not free, we have ourselves to blame. For even now as tyrants trample each individual right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside and dreamed while you were asleep, and wondered what remains of our rights he fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave? Is this still the land of the free and the home of the brave? With that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and hopefully there'll be an update in the same manner as this one was next week. Thank you very much for watching.